In this video, I'm going to troubleshoot some of the problems beginners run into while working in Zbrush. So the first thing I'm going to do is head on over here to the tool palette, and I'm going to select Sphere 3D, and I'm going to draw this on our canvas. Now when we go to attempt to sculpt on this, what ends up happening is Zbrush creates another primitive, and as I keep attempting to sculpt, this is what I end up with. So the reason this is happening is because we are essentially drawing on a 2.5D canvas. So we need to convert this to a 3D canvas. And how we can go about doing that is by hitting the edit button up here. One thing to make sure is to make sure that the stroke is set to drag rectangle. If you have anything else like dots perhaps, or color spray, what ends up happening is this edit button is now grayed out, and it's not going to allow us to change this to a 3D canvas. So what we can do is just set this to drag rectangle, and the next thing is to actually clear the screen we have here. So in order to clear this, all we have to do is hit Control N. So once I hit Control N, I'm just going to draw this out, and now we can see this edit button is now enabled. So the hotkey for this is T, or we can just hit edit to switch to a 3D to the 3D mode. And now we can go ahead and try to sculpt on this. But again, the next thing we run into is that it's going to ask us to make this a polymesh 3D, and this is another thing I've seen people get stumped with. So to sculpt on this, all you have to do is head on over here to the tool palette and come over here to make polymesh 3D. So just hit this, and once you do so, you can now sculpt on this object. So the next thing I want to address is the confusion between a Ztool and a Zproject. So what a Ztool is, it basically, when you save your model as a Ztool, it basically just saves your model and that's it. When you save something as a ZProject, what ends up happening is it saves all your undo history, all the tools in your tool palette, the materials and the changes that you make to your lighting and so on. So it saves a whole bunch, and it's a lot more heavier than just saving things out as a Ztool. Now the next thing I want to address is here in the tool palette. So let's say you were sculpting and you end up with a lot of tools right here in your tool palette. To sort of restore this, all you have to do is come here to this button right here and say restore configuration. But you might also run into another kind of problem, and let me just illustrate that here. So I've got this sphere right here, and I'm just gonna, let's just make that polymesh 3D, and I'm gonna sculpt on this. And let's just create something else here, like a ring. Again, it's going to ask us to make polymesh 3D. And so we've got a whole bunch of like tools right here. So as we keep creating tools and sculpting on them, Zbrush is going to save them out here in this tool palette. And what will end up happening is, even if you try to collapse this, this is not going to, some of these objects are not going to go away. You're just going to find them here in the 3D meshes right here. So we don't see the sphere 3D that we sculpted on here, but it still exists here under 3D meshes. So if you want to delete this, all you have to do is come on over here to this tool. So make sure you select that, head on over to subtool and hit delete. Once we say okay, now when we come here, we can see that that 3D primitive that we sculpted on is gone. So we can do the same thing for the other ones as well. So just delete these. And now we've gotten rid of all those extra tools that we had there. So that's one way of deleting all those tools. So the other problem that people seem to run into is, let's say you were sculpting, and again, let's just make that polymesh 3D. Yep. And I start to append some tools into this. Say, let's add a cube and just move this up like so. Perhaps I'm gonna append a helix switch over to that and do something like so. And let's say you wanted to merge all these subtools together, and you headed over to merge and said merge visible, and you hit merge visible and you don't see anything happen. And the reason for this is because Zbrush has already merged everything, but it merges everything as a tool. So if you head up here, you can see your merge tool. So that's how you find that. And the other thing I wanted to talk about was in respect to Dynamesh. So I'm just going to open up a plane, and I'm just going to sculpt on the surface. So when I do this and I activate Dynamesh, it's basically going to create a hole in your mesh, like so. And a way to fix this is to simply just go back, head on over to your brush, come down to auto masking, and turn backface mask on. Now let me explain why this happens. So let's say you're sculpting on the surface, and if we take a look behind this, you can see that this brush is actually influencing the back of this mesh as well. So in order to prevent that from happening, we turn backface masking on. So let's turn backface masking on, and let's attempt to sculpt. And now if we look behind, it's not influencing the back of this mesh. So this is a problem that you run into while sculpting on thin surfaces and then dynameshing it. Now let's say you didn't have backface masking on, and you've been sculpting, and for some reason you've deleted all your undo history, as well as you probably didn't notice it until much later, and you can't do much about it. So what you can do is, once we Dynamesh and you have this result, just go over this with the inflate brush. So go over the affected region with the inflate brush and Dynamesh and smooth. Then go over that again with the inflate brush and smooth. So that's one way of basically dealing with this, with the inflate brush, smoothing it out, Dynameshing, and you've now fixed this problem. Another thing to keep in mind is just make sure that you have backface mask on for all your brushes, because let me just show you what happens. So now we activated, let's activate backface mask. Yep, so we've got backface mask on here, and when we sculpt, we don't see any kind of influence from this particular brush on the back of this mesh. Actually, it'll be better if I demonstrated it on a new mesh. So let's open up a new mesh here, and let me sculpt on this, and we don't see any influence. However, if we shift it over to a different brush and try to now sculpt on this surface, we can see that this brush is affecting the back. And so you need to go and turn backface masking on for all the brushes that you use when you're sculpting on a thin surface. So once you activate that and you basically sculpt on your surface, it doesn't influence the back. So that's how you go about fixing that problem. Now, another thing that I wanted to address was with regard to the lights. So let me just open this model. So let's say you were sculpting on this model and you wanted to change the lighting situation to evaluate your model, and you headed on over here to the light and you try to adjust the lights, and you don't see any difference in your model. The only difference that you're going to see is when you actually hit the BPR here, and then it's going to render out an image with the current lighting settings. But if you want to see real-time changes in the light, what you need to do is switch from a matte cap material to a standard material. Now when you do this, you can basically change the lighting as you sculpt on your surface, like so. And so in real time, you can basically shift things around and evaluate your model under different lighting circumstances. So that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about in this video. If you have any kind of issues that you've been running into while working in ZBrush, just let me know in the comments and I'll see if I can do a video on that. So I hope this was informative and this helps you out and thanks for watching.